James Petrossi, you are an advocate for humanity and the president of PTNL, which you will tell us what it is in a minute. And you are also the author of the book, Know Your True Self, the formula to raise human consciousness. James, thank you so much for being here.
Hey, thanks so much. I appreciate it.
James, I think your book is timely, and it's been timely for a while because we are surrounded by so much noise, so many voices telling us who we are, or what is it that we should desire, or who is it that we should aspire to be. And we don't know exactly, we don't go inside to look at our inner voice and discover who is it exactly that we are and what is it exactly that we truly want, as opposed to all the things that people want us to want. So all that to say, I'm so happy to have this conversation. I wonder if we could start with your background. How is it that you became interested in this kind of subject?
Yeah, and I guess first, just to allude to PTNL, PTNL I founded about 2 years ago, and it's the abbreviation for the word potential, which we had talked about prior to the show. And our philosophy is that, raising human consciousness is where true potential lies. So how did I get to potential is the question. I sort of had an interesting background. When I was around 11 years old, my father started a sales and marketing consulting company out of our home. He had been in sales for many years with different organizations. So I got to witness the entrepreneurial spirit right in my home and be part of it for many years. It was really exciting. At the beginning, I started sort of assembling his sales and marketing training manuals. Over time, I would travel with him and help him facilitate some of the breakout sessions in his workshops. And then through college, I worked with him as well through internships. And, the relationship was off and on. After college, I didn't have a job, and he didn't have a position for me. So I sold cars for a little while to make ends meet. And then I finally had a new position open with his company, and I sort of proved myself to take it, and started doing international consulting work with all the background I had had with them. But then around my mid-20s, I'd been working in the family business for a long time. I loved it, but we were all going through a lot of change. And for me personally, I really wanted to start something new where I wasn't associated so closely, with my father's legacy and what he had created. So I found my way into advertising through talent development, fell in love with it because I'm always interested in humanity, what makes people tick, what makes them move. And when you're in advertising and you work in strategy, you just get fed with and conduct so many different types of research. And I always struggled with psychology because I'm not necessarily into clinical research, but when you're researching people in the real world, you gain different insights about how they're moving through culture. So a lot of what I was developing over the past, 15 years prior to working with starting PTNL was just working with a lot of amazing brands throughout professional entertainment, sports properties, street art, fashion, film. It was really exciting, but I'd always had this calling, and the calling was one that I had had when I was 11. And when I was 11, my father had started working on this book called The Science of Living, and it was integrated life skills education. And it became a personal project for us for many years that we shared off and on. And there reached a point when I decided to leave my career in advertising. He was sick. I thought I was going to lose him to cancer. Miraculously, he recovered from being on feeding tubes, and I decided to start PTNL. It's something I had always wanted to do around this time in my life. It was a goal, and I, really spent the next, 2.5 years working full-time on Know Your True Self, collaborating on my father with it, which was just a wonderful experience.
Well, you are so blessed, James. As you speak, the first blessing that I see, in addition to being born in the United States, which is a country that has so many freedoms and opportunity, is that you have your father as a role model. And so many people don't have a role model. My father himself, he was never there. So, I grew up basically without a father. So whenever I hear a story of someone like my father and I did this, just hang out or did the other thing, that's just incredible. You are at a higher level, but then you also learn self-confidence through the tutelage of your father and being in all these things. You had a voice and he let you speak, or you participated in his meetings and his coaching. And then in addition to that, you got the knowledge of, okay, this is the material that we are working together, and this is how I can also learn to communicate that material to other people. So I feel like you are so full of blessings. It's just incredible. It just blows my mind.
Yeah, you're making my inner light shine bright right now, but you're right. I mean, if there is something I've always expressed throughout the course of my life, is the gratitude for those circumstances, because you're right. It's a rarity. It's a rarity to be able to get along with your family. Most families consider themselves dysfunctional because we all have challenges that we face. And to be able to work with him throughout my career and life and have him as a mentor is quite the blessing indeed. Among the rest of my family as well, a very fortunate experience. And extremely proud that I'm able to package up, all of the knowledge and insight that we've accumulated over the years and put it together in something that I can share with others.
Wow. Okay, in your book, you have a very nice pyramid, and in this pyramid, you cover self-awareness, virtue, willpower, acceptance, unconditional love, gratitude, and bliss. Can you take us to some of these stages in this pyramid?
Yeah, definitely. The formula to know your true self, the reason we created it, I think from a very high level perspective, if you look at it right now, there's so much information out there. And it's almost like anything you want to know, you just Google it. And that surface level of information is often just your consciousness assumes that you know these things. With all that information out there, we've been studying, you know, human insight for many years, and my dad comes up from a perspective of starting as a teacher and an educator, and me working in advertiser insight. We really created a really nice framework and the formula to know your true self in that pyramid that helps humans understand the nature of themselves in existence and sort of how to navigate life, because there really is no instruction guide for life. So to overcome some of the challenges that we face today, whether it's, challenges with obesity, mental illness, challenges with relationships, job security, addictions, and the environment, know your true self really provides the formula for humans to help themselves. So going into the pyramid in your question, I think self-awareness we have as the foundation for knowing your true self, because self-awareness, in that section, we talk about what I was just mentioning earlier, that for many of us, consciousness is assumed. We're sort of bopping around life, not knowing what's moving us, but if there's something we take for granted more than anything, it's the fact that we are of consciousness. We are an expression of consciousness, and that we are all connected through consciousness. There's an illusion that we're separate, but the reality is that we're all connected through the universal energy field. So after talking about sort of that and self-awareness and the evolution of consciousness, then we get into the human mind, how the mind operates consciously and unconsciously. And really the big, one of the big takeaways is that 95% of our actions are unconscious, and they're unconscious for a reason. Our brain relies on routines. But, within that 95%, you mentioned earlier in the show, it's like, there's so many stimuli, things affecting us, pulling us in different directions. Consciousness now is easily divided. Where does my identity exist? Is it on my Facebook or social media accounts? Is it the way I dress? Is it the groups I belong with? And what we really help to do in understanding the human mind is peeling back the layers of everything that you think is your identity and having you self-reflect on who is really inside, and understanding that you're not your thoughts. You're not the people you hang out with. You're not your behaviors. You're the one that observes those things. And thought observation is a key component inside of there. And then after talking about the evolution of consciousness in the human mind, the last section in the first stage of the pyramid is self-awareness roadblocks, and just looking at the myriad of things from our emotions to certain behaviors that we have that block our self-awareness on a day-to-day basis. Denial being one of the biggest of those. It's easy to see in others, but harder to see in ourselves. So we do a lot of exercises for people to identify some of their own self-awareness roadblocks.
Right. Okay. So you mentioned for a moment that we are not our thoughts, and And I think that we are in a great part, a part of our environment.
Yes.
For example, like I'm in my apartment having this pleasant conversation with you right now, and I feel calm. But if you put me, I don't know, in Bosnia in the middle of the war, I wouldn't be able to feel calm. Also, honesty. For example, we live in a rich country, Canada, the US. So the idea of dishonesty or theft, for example, is just very far in my mind. But if we were to live in a place of scarcity, then theft would be like, oh, there's a piece of meat over there, I could just take it and eat it and steal it. It's
Right.
just so yes, environment creates so much also. I mean, you mentioned that we are all interconnected, but we are interconnected mostly in the near environment, and then of course we have connections to far, far away as well.
Right, right. And that, environmental entanglement that you talk about, that really helps people. I'm from New England, and environmental entanglement and pride is very big in New England and Massachusetts. And you're a Red Sox fan, you love the Patriots. And yes, those are all things that you appreciate, and those are all talents of other individuals, but that doesn't define who you are.
Right.
You're creating the perception or illusion that that is your true self. Now, it doesn't mean you're not allowed to enjoy those things. It's just, do you identify with that, or do you identify through your true self or your spirit? Yeah. But it's so interesting how those environmental factors really shape, the identity of cultures. And anytime you travel, you see it. You end up in a new city and everyone's moving at a different pace. Everyone calls sandwiches a different thing.
Yeah, yeah.
Everyone's got their own sort of take on life from an external standpoint. But from an internal standpoint, we all have that same connection to that inner light inside of us.
Right. Another thing that occupies my mind is how do we filter the noise around us? For example, the topic of obesity. Okay, the obesity is not because we are hungry that we are obese. We are obese basically because we have all these stimuli of, okay, buy this coke or this soft drink and buy these chips and buy all this sun, and then the chemical compounds of this food is also made in a way that makes us addictive. So it's hard. Okay, if I know my true self, okay, I want to be a person who is in good physical shape,
Right.
right? And I want to avoid this poison. But at the same time, everywhere I go, I see all this advertising. It's just difficult to filter that out. And of course, we are creatures of habits. Once we build a habit, to block it, then it's easier to navigate through life with this new habit. But at the same time, at one moment or another, we had to make that conscious effort to avoid this temptation here and temptation there.
Yeah, it's very difficult. I mean, if you look at, 21st century dopamine triggers, because when you think about your willpower, that's all released on dopamine in the brain. And there's been studies done on dopamine triggers in rats. And it's interesting that, if they get a reward from clicking a lever, they'll go back to that lever. Now, if they administer a shock instead of give them a reward or a treat, they just keep hitting themselves with the shock until they're completely numb, because the promise of the reward is greater than the reward itself. The promise of eating a nice quart of ice cream is a lot better than the reward of eating it, because the reward of eating it is you feel like crap after. And I think a lot of it, when it comes to habit and routine, it's like, there are so many things that are drawing us in from the world of desire. And when I entered advertising, it was like, advertising was something that you saw when you tuned into media. Now life revolves around media, so you are in one constant advertisement. You probably consider yourself one larger advertisement. So a lot of the challenge I think that we really face is understanding, social media is this brilliant tool, this awesome innovation. It's helped create this amazing network to create, connect humanity, but it's also turned into a little bit of just like sort of this, mall of junk. You know, there's just so much noise out there. It's almost, let's just call it digital pollution. It's very much like we're living in a digitally polluted environment. And actually, a lot of these platforms that we go on, you know, the more you pollute, the more you get rewarded, right? Because the algorithm loves pollution, because pollution creates more desire and more demand and more draw and more addiction. So, you know, for all of us, I think it's just understanding how we use certain things in our lives as a tool, something to help us connect, and how we can also differentiate that as something that helps us connect with people. But if it becomes our reality, we really lose that connection with our true self. And that's when technology severs that connection.
Right. You bring up the point that we are not taught about self-awareness and consciousness in anywhere, basically, where there's not an instruction manual for that. We learn how to build, I don't know, put together an IKEA chair, how to do programming, how to do whatever, but there is not a course on how to be aware of yourself, how to know who you are. I wonder if you can elaborate on that.
Yeah, it's interesting. You know, it's something that puzzled me. You know, I think just because I've always had an interest in consciousness and the idea of it from a young age, and you know, I think I was fortunate because growing up, I got to learn a lot of life skills education, like personality types, goal setting, stress reduction, happiness. And that was in like the early mid 90s when the School of Positive Psychology hasn't formed. We were still studying what's wrong with people instead of what's right with people.
Mm.
Now that we've created that shift, you know, when it comes to teaching humans to be human, you know, there was a point when I think a long time ago when, you know, science and religion operated as one school of thought. And when they broke away from each other, a large part of that was because consciousness, you know, they could, if you look at the sciences, they can quantify space, the objects between things. They can, you know, quantify time, matter, and energy. But consciousness is unmeasurable by us, you know, and because it's immeasurable by us, it's sort of just discounted. And where we do learn about it is through random acquired education through our lives. A lot of people are learning about elements of consciousness through mindfulness, which covers some of about like reflection and thought observation, or they might pick it up in other areas. But as a standard of what it means to be human, the only place it's really taught in is probably religion. But in religion, it's not taught in sort of logical principles. Then you have to buy into a philosophy, and that philosophy creates division when it should really be uniting everyone. So it's an interesting circumstance. So I think what we've tried to do within that formula is self-awareness, use that as the foundation. Then how does that thread of consciousness tie through all of your other actions, from living a virtuous life, from having the willpower to overcome unhealthy desires, to accepting and embracing reality as it is, you know, to sharing unconditional love through self-love, through empathy, through compassion, through forgiveness for others. And then making sure through all of that, you're expressing gratitude and just appreciating all the things in life. I mean, I'm just gazing around my studio right now, and I'm just in awe always of all of technology, all the innovation, all the things that we just assume we need to have. And it's like, you know, we're so blessed as a culture to have so many things. And, you know, gratitude is we just, you know, are programmed when our consciousness gets hijacked, what we were talking about before, our brains are programmed to want more and appreciate less. You know, they truly are. And then bliss, you know, finally, you know, yeah, bliss is all about controlling your thoughts and finding bliss. But let's be honest, like we can't spend our time just meditating under a tree all day. So what do? We find bliss in planet Earth through the development of our talents, finding ways to help humanity, collaborating with others, and fulfilling grand visions and how we want to leave our spiritual impression, our true self, our mark on the world.
Wow. Um, just to make a point on gratitude, you know, I come from a poor country, Colombia, and I have gone to other poor countries. And, you know, just the mere fact of flicking my finger, having light, and just
Yes.
doing this and having water that I can drink, it's just, I used to get excited over it.
Very much so.
I
And it
get
was interesting.
excited over these things, and having a warm place now in winter, and being alive in amidst COVID, where people are fearing for their life, and just being alive is just such a bliss.
It is. It is. I mean, there's so much to be found in joy, in nature, the human experience, and also to have gratitude for the compassion that we have as humans, for each other and helping each other. It's so interesting when you think about compassion and gratitude because, when COVID first started, I remember it was just you went on LinkedIn, everyone's offering to help each other. How can I help? I'm offering my services. Is anyone in need? People are outside helping each other, making masks, transforming factories, anything to help the greater good of humanity. And now, once everyone's sort of settled into their new reality, then it's like me, 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 me.
Back to normal.
And
Yes.
everyone just wants to get back to their lives and get back to traveling, get back to the way things were. Where let's take some time to reflect on what we've learned from this grandiose experience and really apply that to moving forward, not try to go back to where we were.
So let me ask you, what are some exercises or conscious behaviors that we could do in order to gain more consciousness or self-awareness, and become more in unison with the universe, and just help out each other?
Yeah, I think one thing just to start with is start taking inventory of your own thoughts throughout the day. And when thought impulses surface in your mind, it's interesting, it's estimated in different ranges, but let's just say we have 60,000 thoughts a day. About 80% of them are negative in nature. And it's not that we're not wired for negativity. It's just our subconscious is there to protect us. And it's in a constant state of comparing, judging, liking, and disliking based on all the archives of knowledge that it has, that it can pull from, that it's experienced, that it's seen. Even the things that we can't remember are stored. We can't recall them, but that all gets stored in the subconscious and our connection to universal consciousness. So, throughout the day, I was laughing with someone that I was coaching because they were talking about judging people. They're like, I don't know why, but someone walks by and they're wearing something I wouldn't wear. And I'm automatically thinking that looks stupid on them. And you have to identify that that's not me. That's my mind casting judgment. Who am I? And then ask yourself, who am I? I'm not that thought. I'm the one that observes it. And you know what? Like, maybe just appreciate that they came from a different background, a different perspective, and just accept them for who they are. And I think the more you go through the day and you think about the thoughts you're having and you reflect on why you're having them, and are they positive in nature or negative nature? What is your mind trying to protect you from? And what's the true reality of the situation? Observe the situation, because a lot of the times, we're fed a lot of false beliefs, not just through the media, but through our own mind, that there's a potential threat in front of us when there's actually not, at all. And that thought reflection takes a lot of practice. And I think that's one of the reasons in Know Your True Self, we put the self-reflections through in this. I think one thing we learned in the development process is looking inward isn't a natural experience for most people. To be able to look inward, a lot of walls go up. Oh, this is just who I am. That's how I act. I'm always going to be sort of a jerk, or I'm always going to have this addiction, or I just love food. That's why I overeat. The reality is that seems to be a symptom of denial, and to go back and peel back those layers and understand your thoughts and understand what experiences, what traumas, what events in life are causing you to have these behaviors, and what can you do to start to make change, and what small goals can you create to shift and redirect your consciousness to more positive behaviors. And creating those small changes, small changes amount to other great small changes, and all of a sudden, if you put in the work, and that's the thing within knowing your true self, it's not like a 30-day challenge here. It's a lifetime commitment to being good. And it takes a lot of practice, but if you're educated on it, I think we can make everyone really well equipped and hopefully raise the consciousness of humanity.
Yeah, I like to highlight the part that is a lifetime commitment. And it just takes a little improvement this week, and maybe another little improvement next month. It's just, for example, just getting in shape. It took me 2 years to stop eating sugar. I used to
Yeah.
put sugar, like 4 spoons of sugar in my coffee. And then one day I said, okay, I'm just going to put 3 spoons of sugar in my coffee. And then 2 months later, 2 spoons. So, even though I knew my end goal, it's just sometimes it's just hard to do like a heartbreak. Some people can do it, but some other people takes an adjustment, time adjustment, and like everything, going to the gym. And I cannot go to the gym. At one time, I was a power lifter, so I was lifting lots of weight, but that came to adding an extra pound every week. Not like, oh, today I'm bench pressing 100 pounds and then next month it's going to be 300. No, it just took almost more than a year to do that. So everything in life, as long as we have that consciousness that we want to self-improve and we kind of know the direction, and sometimes we have setbacks, and don't not to allow those setbacks to be, okay, that's the end of the story. No, we got to get up again and start from zero again.
Yeah. And also too, your story about the weight loss hit me because 2 years prior to beginning the journey of Know Your True Self, I was 40 pounds overweight. And I thought to myself, well, if I'm going to work on Know Your True Self in 3 years, I need to start my transformation now. It's going to take me a year and a half just to shed this weight. And I think there's a lot of like, we're all looking for the quick fix. The reality in life, though, and no matter what you're taking, is have patience, be resilient. In terms of the setbacks, appreciate them, learn from them. I mean, go outside and observe nature and look at the struggle all of these creatures, big and small, have on a daily basis, just trying to survive. These squirrels outside, just trying to get enough acorns, and then a storm comes through and then a big predator comes through. It's like, we are the same as these other creatures. We think we're these, godlike images walking around the earth that are creating all these things. We're just another element of nature. And it's a struggle, and to embrace the struggle, because it's a beautiful struggle. And every time you go through those challenges and you learn and you overcome them, your true self becomes brighter and your soul becomes stronger. And it's just a remarkable experience to be part of. There is no bad, there is only good and growth.
Can you share for a minute your journey in as far as losing weight? How, from the moment you said, "Okay, I gotta lose some weight," to I don't know, the inner conversation you had in your brain of eating this versus not eating that. Can you share some of that
Yeah,
with
I'll
us?
share it. And it goes into a lot of different consumption patterns. But yeah, first it was weight. When my dad got sick, we come from an Italian family. I think I was eating like pasta for everybody because he couldn't eat. So, I had gotten bigger than I had ever been before. I had always been pretty lean, but, I'm like 6'1" and I was about 235, 40 pounds. And I had a hernia surgery. And I thought, you know what? I just don't want to sit here for 8 weeks healing, eating junk. Let me just start only eating healthy foods, transform my diet. And in, 4 or 5 months, I was down to about, 200, and then have been in that range ever since. And after I stopped eating, which was challenging because at the time I was living in New York City. So, you have access to really healthy food, but my favorite Chinese dumplings are right downstairs. There's a slew of onslaught of never ending 24/7 accessibility to great food. Then, after that, I quit drinking alcohol because I thought, well, if I'm out to raise a consciousness of humanity, I don't really want to block my consciousness in any way. And alcohol, I've had an interesting relationship for years, because in advertising, I worked on probably 30 different alcohol brands, everything from Espolòn tequila to Wild Turkey, to Altos, the list goes on, Chivas Regal Scotch. And over time, I was like, geez, I'm going to have to give this up because this is sort of a new pathway, a new calling. So now I sort of stripped off that layer. Now, as I'm stripping out these layers that are blocking my self-awareness, I'm getting closer to my true self, which feels great. So those challenges were there. Then I moved to Austin, Texas, and all of a sudden I'm writing Know Your True Self, and I'm getting painfully sick. And I'm thinking, I'm going to an infectious disease doctor. I'm checking out all these things. I can't get off the couch. I'm working on this book. I'm thinking this has got to be a spiritual intervention, from something I've done, a little bit of growth punishment. But, I got through that, and it turns out that, I have an allergy to soy, dairy, gluten, and something else. So like, now now I've sort of even have less of those things. And, it goes back to something my dad said to me when we were working on Know Your True Self. He was at home and he's on feeding tubes, and,
Wow.
it sounds grim, but you have this little backpack and it's giving you proper nourishment. And he said to me, he said, you know what the best blessing of this experience is? He goes, I don't have to make decisions anymore about what I'm going to eat. I just get my nutrition. I don't have to like go through, and it brought me back to being in New York. You open an Uber Eats app and you just stare at all these food for about 45 minutes. You're hungry. Time goes by. Nothing's good enough because everything looks better than everything else. And you're just getting this onslaught. And I think, for me in my life, one of my biggest challenges has always been self-control, because I just love to have fun. I'm very expressive. So I think, from a growth experience, changing my diet, stopping the drinking social life that accompanied that, and then really getting then even cleaner from a diet here. It was a tough experience. I mean, you really got to work at it, and you really have to overcome desires. And to this day, it's interesting because, my wife doesn't have these dietary challenges. So, sometimes I'm sitting next to her having a sweet potato while she's having a cheese pizza, but all you can do is look at her and just be grateful that they can enjoy it,
Wow.
and just, so it's pretty fun. It's a great experience when you do create those changes, because once you get over those setbacks you were talking about, the sense of accomplishment just wants you to push even further and see what else you're capable of.
Well, James, I tell you, I enjoy reading your book. It has so many graphics and it's well illustrated. It's easy to understand. Sometimes I have to pause and digest what you are trying to say, and you make questions. Like you in the book, you say how I forgot the questions, but every other chapter you create these questions for us to re-examine ourselves. So I congratulate you on writing that book. Can you tell us one more time the title of the book and where can the listeners find it?
Yeah, the title is Know Your True Self, The Formula to Raise Human Consciousness. It's available Amazon, Barnes and Noble, should be all major retailers and all formats. It's not an audiobook specifically because it does have a lot of illustrated components to it, and it's more of a true self-discovery
Right, right. It's not a book that you will listen while you're jogging.
guide. Exactly, yeah.
James, thank you so much for your time.
Hey, thanks so much. It's been a great experience talking to you.